Hey guys, welcome to Coast Lifestyle. So we are here, episode 25, Steps to Building a Custom Home. Heather is definitely going to take the lead on this one. It is, if you haven't caught our previous episodes, something you have personal, intimate experience with, right? In fact, when actually was your home? Like, when did you guys kind of move in? When was it complete?
We completed it back in October-ish of 2023, so fairly recently.
Months ago,
Yeah,
yes. Like we
yeah.
got to document this while it is fresh and alive. And so anyway, Heather, today you're gonna kind of take us not quite bird's eye, but of course not nitty gritty every single tiny detail because that would take that. It's kind of a series, and this is our new construction
Yeah.
series. So if you're interested in this, we've got some things coming up, and we also had some things on financing and cool stuff the last few weeks. So Heather, take it away. What you got for us today?
Yeah, so we've kind of talked in the past about like if you're thinking about building a custom home, what exactly like do you need to think about? Whether it be, your financial situation, your timing, your freedom to focus on such things. We focused on a lot of the like, is it right for me? And some basic questions to ask yourself. So if you haven't seen those, definitely look back at those. But let's say you have asked yourself all the questions we've talked about in the past. You have the time, you have the money, you have the freedom to focus on this project. Now what? What's the next step? And as you might be able to guess, the next step is let's find a real estate agent that knows land and how to go about building. They know what to look for. Now, I will be totally transparent and real that there is no ideal piece of land. There is no way to tell this land is absolutely perfect and will definitely pass all the inspections to make sure I can build here. But an agent can at least give you a really good idea, especially if they know the specific area that you're looking for land. So, first up, real estate agent. Find one, rely on them. They'll usually have great connections to all the different contractors you need. The next step is find the land. And the very first and foremost thing that I recommend is focus on an area. Don't focus on finding like that ideal piece of land right away. Just be like, okay, I want to live in this neighborhood ideally, or I want to live within 20 minutes of this area, whether it be where you work or family or whatever. Like focus on an area and then keep an eye out for land from there. Now, honestly, things to look out for, there's not really one set like magical formula for the ideal piece of land because depending on where you're at, there's going to be different building sciences, which means there's going to be different qualifications for buying land. So, but in general, just look for an area that, again, your real estate agent can help you a lot. But ideally, if you're looking for land, just look for the area. What kind of features are on the land? Is there water nearby on the land? Is the listing agent should usually do some homework to be like, hey, there's water available from the road. There is electricity available from the road or whatever that you can bring in. Like you can look at little basic details like that to be like, okay, is this something that's actually feasible or is it going to be a much bigger project, like bringing in electricity, bringing in water, or do you have to rely on well and build a well? Like there's so many different things you have to think about, but you can at least start piecing together details from there based off of the listing. And I don't know how Mississippi is, but for here we have a lot of county records that'll tell you like where things are, if there's water nearby, or if they know if there's water nearby, then it'll usually give those details in county records. But let's say, you find a piece of land that you're like, heck yes, this is where I want to be. It's in a great area. I would love this. Let's purchase it. So actually, let me take one step back. Kind of going back into like the usability of the land. You're going to want to make sure that if there's literally nothing done on the land whatsoever, you want to make sure that when you're thinking about purchasing the land, that you're able to get a feasibility contingency, because you need the time to test soil, to if it's near water, like you need time to look into those rights. You need time to do check on zoning. You need time to get a few contractors out there to figure out if that land even is buildable. So sorry, my brain is getting a little mixed up because there's so much detail here. It's actually hard to focus on step 1, 2, 3, because a lot of these also happen concurrently. But essentially, when you buy land, it's typically going to be in one of a few different states. It's going to be the seller has done literally nothing. They just own the land and want to sell the land. There will be some that have basic studies done. Like they might have done a basic soil test. They might tell you, hey, here's the water situation. Here's the electricity situation. And in very rare cases, you'll have fully permitted land, meaning somebody has already gone through, done all of the necessary tests. They've even designed a house specifically for that land, and that's fully permitted. Like there's different steps that you can go through. So for me personally, we ended up buying fully permitted land, even though, obviously I've had to know and understand the entire process that came before that. But let's say that you're ready to purchase the land. Like you found the perfect one, whatever scenario it was in. Now what comes next? So we've kind of talked about this last week when Jim was our guest speaker, but essentially when you're ready to purchase land, the best option is usually cash, because then you can actually end up using the land as collateral for building the home. However, some people don't have that luxury, and that's fine. And some people have the luxury of time. So there are some cases where you can get a land loan. And then the best option is usually try to pay that off before you start building, or just understand that you're going to need a much bigger down payment for the actual build loan. So make sure that you have that figured out. And then, like I said, during the feasibility contingency period, you want to be testing the soil, looking at zoning. You want to be talking to the county and figuring out what you need to know for that area. And if you really can build in that area, there's a lot of tests that you can do to make sure it's the perfect land before you actually end up purchasing and closing on that land, and then preparing for the next step of building. So that's everything through land, which I know I was all over the place, but
I love it. I think a lot of times it's, as if they've never bought land before or dealt with building a home or what have you, there can be some misconceptions that it's super easy. I don't know about in your area, but we've got a lot of land around here that's sometimes I get a call and it's we have $5,000, pieces of land or lots, but the thing is, like you were saying, you got to get utilities to it. It's raw land. You got to clear the land. Then that particular land, sometimes construction costs are going to be a lot higher because you have to build the land up. Or maybe it has wetlands and you're very limited on where you can build. So there's a house that's there and you've got all your utilities and it's built. Well, that there can be a house there, right? And there can be some type of water, sewer, septic, something, right? And so then, there's also, if you're not going to be able to get community sewer, then you have to be able to put a septic tank, and not all land can receive a septic tank. So you've got a lot of different things that come into play. So definitely make sure that you have a confident, team to help guide you through that. Was there anything, we've talked a whole different episode, so we're not going to get super into it, but just off the bat, is there anything number one mistake, wish you knew, anything when it comes to up to actually picking and closing on the land? Anything in that process maybe that you're I really want to say this one thing about this from personal experience?
Yeah. So mixed personal experience for other clients and personal experience for me. There's two main things that come to mind. And one of them you touched on, which is make sure that you have a basic septic design and you know where septic is going to go. Because we actually have a lot that's a few doors down from my house that they thought they were ready to build. They thought everything was great. And then it turns out they have nowhere to put their septic system. And we're unincorporated county. Like, we don't have sewer or anything in this area. We have to use septic. And so he figured out, ooh, wait, with the building setbacks that we have to have from the water, where are we going to put our septic? So he's been fighting with the county for years over that. So that's definitely a big one is when you're going through your feasibility, like, make sure you're designing a septic system plan. In some cases, such as mine, we got an easement with our neighbor's property so that our drain field for our septic is actually on their property. While the septic system itself is on ours. But the next big thing is just because a house is already on the land does not necessarily mean that it is the best option is going to be the easiest option. So especially if it's a really old home with a really old septic system, you might not be able to just connect to their septic system. You might have to redesign and reinstall a new septic system. Maybe zoning has changed. Maybe it was single family residences on X amount of acres. Maybe it's changed commercial. Maybe it is, maybe there's different single family home requirements per acre. There's a lot of things that can change. So even if there is a home that you're thinking about tearing down and building on top of, you still need to check all those same things, which I think is a big misconception is house is there, therefore it's fine. When in reality, code could have changed over the years. Again, systems get really old and need to be replaced over the years. There's a lot of different things that can be going on. So try not to make assumptions if you can. Because just things change. Like, I know my home was permitted 6 months before a home on the other side of the lake, and we have completely different rules for some of our stuff. So just make sure you pay attention to that. And even if you're listening to your neighbors who built, a year before you, some things could have changed. So
yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. Things are changing all the time. They can adopt a whole new set of code that changes everything, and that could happen yesterday. So making sure that you're doing your due diligence on changes, upcoming changes, what have you. Okay, so now we have our land. The sad thing about land is you don't get keys at closing, so that's not as exciting. But now here you are, right? You own your land. You're ready to build. So how do we get from looking out over our new land that we just bought to U-Hauls in the yard?
Yep. So one of the first things that you're going to have to think about is if the land was not prior permitted, then typically once the county records the new record numbers, you are the owner. However, if there are existing permits on the land, there is a possibility that it'll take longer for those to process into your name. So again, our land was fully permitted, and granted, we purchased it smack dab in the middle of COVID. And with that, we had to wait over 3 months for all of the permits to officially change in our name as well. So just know that maybe you can start the other studies right away. Maybe you need to wait before you can break ground. It just depends on your individual county and your individual situation. But let's say that the land is not fully permitted. Let's say there's nothing done to it. But you did basic feasibility contingency items, again, like the soil test, the septic plan, things like that. The next thing is going to be filing for more permits. So you're going to say, okay, how do I connect to this water? Can I file a permit to connect to the water? How am I going to connect to electricity? I need to file the permit to connect to electricity. Start with all of the basic permitting that you need to be ready to build a house. So there might be more soil tests that need to be done. There might be more, they're basically land engineers that you'll need to talk to figure out exactly, like, yes, you can build, but where can you build? Are there any rules to building? Is there any rules to, like, if you're building onto a slope, How deep in the slope do you have to go? Like, you still need to figure out a lot of these items and permit as necessary. Now, one big thing that I think is a common misconception is that all of your basic permitting and all of the things that lead up to building the house are not included in a construction loan. A construction loan is literally just building the house. Like, literally just, let's tear down the trees, let's build the frame, let's build all the details, now we can move in. That is all that's covered. So when it comes to the basic permitting, when it comes to the feasibility studies, when it comes to all of that stuff, that's cash. That's your own money. Now, some people take out personal loans and stuff like that, but typically that is your own money that you use for that stuff. So as we talked about before, you need to make sure you have money on hand throughout this entire process. And you always need to have, it was recommended to us 10%. I think literally close to 50% is of the cost of what you believe the home build is going to be, is what you want to have on hand. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on there. Is you want to get the rest of the permits done, and kind of concurrently with that, you want to start building your home, because you can't get the final build permit until you have the design of the home that's going to be there, and you know how much disturbance area you're going to create. So depending on your area will depend on how much space you have. But let's say the first floor of your home is, let's say, 1,000 square feet. A lot of places will also have a disturbance area limit, which is typically 10 to 15 feet outside of the actual build space. Our area was incredibly strict, and we were only supposed to disturb 5 feet of that, just because we are in a very protected land area. But like, you'll need that home design in order to get your final building permit. So you'll kind of want to start working on those designs concurrently or simultaneously with the rest of the permits. And yeah, so then you'll have a really good idea of, kind of what the space is going to look like, where you're going to build. Once you have the building permits for the land, you can shift certain things. Like, you can shift a wall internally. You can maybe move a bathroom from like right here to like right next door. Like, you can do little small changes, but your building footprint in the basic area where the pipes are going to come out of the ground and where electrical is going to connect, like that kind of stuff needs to stay pretty much the same because of the permits. And then from there, once you have all of the building permits done, you know how you're connecting to water, sewer, gas, electricity, septic, whatever the case is. Once you basically have a plan, somewhere in there, you also need to find the general contractor that you're going to use to actually build the house. We've kind of talked about before that there are some contractors out there that have set plans that you can kind of choose from and be like, I want you to build that. But let's say you're doing everything fully custom from scratch, your own designs, everything. Then somewhere in there, you're going to want to find a GC to start creating a plan with how much is this going to cost? What is the timing going to look like? Do you have any special requirements? What is your process like for getting paid? I believe a typical contractor, I'm trying to remember what ours was, but I want to say it's like, could be butchering this, but I want to say it's like 13% of the build cost is typically a contractor's fee. I don't remember for sure, but yeah, you just need to include that in your costs. So then what's going to happen is you're talking to your GC about all the build costs and what materials you're going to use and what their fee is and all the other things. And then you're going to need to put together essentially an itemized list. And then that itemized list is actually what you end up sending to the lender that you're getting your construction loan from. And essentially what happens is, once you get that construction loan, like, they go off of that itemized list and they'll pay you out for very specific items as basically as they come up. But before I get into too much detail on that, because I know there's a lot, do you have any questions on like that part, like from permitting to like starting to look at the lender, like the construction loan?
I think just that if correct me if I'm wrong, but we kind of talked about you can have very hands-on, very hands-off, just depending on the type of new construction, the type of new home. But if you're gonna go fully custom, I remember you telling me like you think about like I'm thinking about material lists and I'm like, oh yeah, the roof, the brick, the faucets, the tubs. But like how much more was it? Like you were talking about what house wrap, what vapor barrier, like the things that you're just like, and then like being hands-on with that. Like if you had it to do over again, like would you be that hands-on, and was it massively different than what you were expecting it to be?
Yeah, great question. So there was a lot more hands-on. We kind of designed it that way personally because we knew it was going to be an expensive project. We knew we couldn't afford to have somebody else do the entire thing. So we decided to sacrifice a lot of our time to be more hands-on. So instead of just relying on our contractor to be like, all right, build the frame, we'll start choosing the details, we were way more hands-on with, okay, so we don't want typical OSB siding or sheathing. We want specifically one that is more water resistant and sun resistant so that it can protect the house better and it won't deteriorate as fast, especially in our area. Like we have a lot of still water. We rain a lot in the Pacific Northwest, and specifically where we don't get a lot of sun because we're covered with trees. So we needed more ways to protect against water. We needed more ways to protect against the wildlife and the trees and stuff like that. So there's a lot more things that we decided to think about for the longevity of the home, because ideally we wanted the home to outlive us. So we definitely focused a lot more on those details. Not everybody will, and that's okay. Most GCs have done this for many, many, many years. And so they have a process. So if you just go handle it, and then I'll figure out everything else, like all the interior details, the siding, stuff like that. Like if you build out the frame, I'll handle everything past that. But again, like there are ways that you can kind of interject and be like, okay, so I know you usually use this, but I want to add this. And yes, I understand the costs. Okay, now I know your process is usually this kind of siding, but I want this kind of siding, and this is why, and I understand the costs. Like you can be basically as hands-on or hands-off as you want to be, depending on how much money you have. Because if we had endless funds for this home build, we would have probably hired a designer, like beyond the architect, beyond the GC, like an actual designer for the home. But instead we did everything ourselves, which is a lot more work.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I feel like it's kind of like like you go order some food and you're like, yeah, give me the number 5, exactly how it comes. Or you're like, go to the coffee shop and you want a triple espresso with this and that. And like,
exactly.
Like times a million.
Yep, that is a great comparison. It really is like, how granular do you want to be? Like, yes, there needs to be waterproofing, but a waterproofing can essentially be like a tar substance. But we know that there's a lot of underground water where we are. So even though, yes, we can get away with permitting with just the tar substance, we also want to put another barrier to extra protect the foundation. Like, yeah, you can go way more granular, and you can be like, I swear my husband's YouTube for 3 years was just building science and like, oh, what kind of vapor barrier is best? What kind of sheathing is best? What kind of siding is best? Is there a difference between, like name brand Hardy panel versus not name brand Hardy panel and some other cement siding? Like, there's a lot. So if you want to be more hands-on, like just make sure you have the connections, you have the desire and ability to learn about those other things, to know what's best to add and what isn't. And your GC will help correct you kind of along the ways as well. But yeah. Any other
Perfect.
questions on that one?
So we have now the loan, the permits, the contractor lined up. We picked our vapor barrier.
Yep.
Now,
That was the most memorable thing for me, which is why I keep bringing it up, because I'm like, I remember being like, why is this important? Oh my God. And like, it was a whole thing.
I would probably take me days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to get to the end of YouTube or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so now how do we bring it home? Like, what is it kind of from now you've kind of done all the groundwork, you got things moving and grooving, like how do we get from there to live in there?
Yep. So once you have the build loan, again, you're going to need like an itemized list of what you expect everything to cost, what the GC's cost is. You're going to have everything figured out. You're even going to have an overages section with the list, just because it's required by the lender. Let's say you have your collateral figured out and you know exactly how you're paying for it. Let's say all that's figured out. So then the next part is clearing the land, obviously, whether you have a ton of trees or just shrubbery or just grass. There's going to be the need to clear the land. There's going to be the need possibly to pack down the dirt that was dug up when you were clearing all the shrubbery and stuff off of it. And then you start with your foundation. And there's so many different kinds of foundations, so I won't even start to get into what that looks like, because it can be different for literally every area. Like my foundation is different from my neighbor's foundation, because our dirt is actually slightly different from their dirt. So I won't get into too much detail on that, but you're going to have your foundation next, and that'll be varying levels of complications or whatever. And then once that's in, you just start your framing and you can go through the framing. And if you have multiple stories, you're going to see your first floor frame go in. And then once all of that base is up, you're going to see your second floor go on top of the not floorboards, floor joists for the next floor. Like you're going to start seeing everything stack, and you're not going to have walls right away. You're going, except for the needed support walls, like the structural walls. So you'll still see like boards leaned up to like hold certain walls up and stuff like that, because they're going to start building everything one by one. The big thing that I've touched on before to remember is that a lot of construction loans, they pay out after something is done. So if you're needing to pay for, let's say, $100,000 worth of lumber, usually it's 50% up front, 50% once it's delivered. So you're going to need to have a lot of cash on hand to pay for those in advance. And different GCs will handle it a little differently on how they pay it, or how they get the money from you, or how they get the money from the bank. But genuinely though, like you're going to need to have that cash on hand to cover everything until the bank comes through, inspects, and says, yep, framing is completely done. Here's your money. But also during this entire process, like you're wanting to go to vendors to figure out what windows you want. You're going to want to go to places to figure out what sheathing you want before the frame even goes up, so you know how your house is going to be encased and protected. You're going to want to start figuring out what roof you want, so that once they finish the framing on the roof, they can actually put a roof on to protect what's inside and underneath. You are going to want to figure out a lot of these big ticket items pretty quickly, so that once they get to it, they know exactly what they're going to do, and they can just go instead of waiting for you or leaving the house unprotected in a storm or whatever the case is. And then, oh man, from there, like there's going to be a lot of little things that you're going to want to think about. There's also going to be a lot of inspections, both from the lender to ensure that they can actually pay you out for certain items, and from the city or county, who are looking to say, yep, you did this to code. Yep, you did this to code. And every area has different code. Like I know for a fact that my building codes are completely different than your building codes because you have hurricanes, you have warmer weather, we have really wet weather, we don't have any natural disasters like the East Coast does or the South does, except for earthquakes. But even when you're framing, like you might get flagged. Let me rephrase this. Every single framing job you ever do, you're going to get flagged for something. It's completely natural. You can get flagged for like 20 different items. You can get flagged for 100 different items. And it can be as simple as, hey, you used a 2x4 for this wall, but based off of the weight bearing and blah, 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 you might want to use a 2x6 for this wall. Hey, these steps, and we had this issue, every single step is to code except for one. It's half an inch off. You need to change your steps so that you are to code on that one step that's half an inch off. Like there's just random things that they'll catch you on, especially in framing, that'll happen. So just be ready for those inspections as they come. Talk to your GC about, hey, what do we expect to happen? Or once it's done, like what were the issues that popped up? How are we fixing it? Sometimes they're cheap fixes, sometimes they're really expensive fixes. It really just depends on the situation. But it's also why you really want, especially with framers, very good framers, because the better they are, the less you'll have to worry about, most likely when stuff like that comes up. And then from there, it's just piece by piece. Like it's, hey, framing went up, awesome. Now we're getting siding on top of the sheathing. The roof is going on, then it's insulation and it's drywall. You also have to think of what you want insulated, because a lot of places will only insulate like bedrooms and the exterior, but they won't necessarily insulate the individual like laundry room or the living room or the powder room on the main floor. Like they won't necessarily automatically insulate those things. So you do need to decide that kind of stuff as well. You need to decide what kind of drywall. There's different thicknesses of drywall, different fire ratings for drywall. You're going to, once all of that's done, you're going to start putting in your flooring, whether it be carpet, hardwood, vinyl, whatever the case is. And then from there comes your trim. What kind of trim do you want? Do you want thick trim, thin trim? Do you want rounded corners? Do you want 90-degree corners? If you have any rounded elements in your home, it's going to be more complicated to do it because, you know, most of our stuff is not, it's not naturally rounded. Possibly the most interesting thing to me that I learned, which I knew in theory, but it was still different seeing it, is a lot of times when the basic trim is done, the basic drywall is done. Oh, and there's different finishes on drywall. When all those basic things are done, there's no finishing touches like the caulking or painting or anything like that. You're frequently going to look at a wall and be like, it's crooked. Why is it crooked? There's a bulge here. Why is there a bulge here? When in reality, any house you go into has those issues. There's drywall is not perfectly straight. Baseboards are not perfectly straight. Floorboards are not perfectly straight. But it's the caulking and the painting and the finishing touches that make everything look sleek and straight and proper and like where it needs to be. So as you go through and you're like, something seems off, talk to your GC about it. But more than likely, if it's something small like that, it's totally normal. So, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, being gut and remodels that you've done.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think it's really important, like if possible, that your lender is comfortable with the contractor and the contractor is comfortable with the lender. And may not always happen, but ideally if they've worked together in the past, that can go a long way too. For making sure that everybody is kind of staying on the same, on the same page with all of that. And I remember, so even all the way to the very, very end, because I remember this when you were finishing up and you're like, okay, it's our final inspection. And then you're like, nope, next week's our final inspection.
Yep.
It's not our final inspection. So,
yep.
Was there any well, it's kind of a trick question because I know there was, but like, what were kind of you're like, okay, the house is beautiful, it's built, you've got the caulk and the everything's done, but yet you have to still make the bank and the contractor and the city and the county and the whoever happy. And so, what is that last? Like, I'm talking about everything is done except maybe what may get flagged, but like, you think that the house is completely done. Can we bring our U-Haul tomorrow?
Yeah. So let's say everything's done, you have your final permit or your final inspection, and they check off on it, everything's good. Then the next point is talking to your lender, talking to the county, being like, look, everything's done, we passed all of our inspections. Can we either, and we talked about this before, convert our loan or refinance and get a whatever your new standard loan is. And so essentially the county will say, yep, everything's good. You did pass your final inspection. Fabulous. Here's your certificate of occupancy. By technicality, you cannot actually live in your home without a certificate of occupancy. I'll leave it like that. I could get into way more nitty-gritty, useless detail, but I'll leave it at that. And then once you have your certificate of occupancy, typically that's what you give to your lender, and you say, see, passed final inspection, got the certificate of occupancy, let's refinance, let's convert, whatever the case is. And then once both of those things are done, the lender and the county certificate of occupancy, in theory, it's the next day that you can bring in the U-Haul and get moving in, get settled. By law, builders have at least a 1-year builder warranty. So if anything happens that is the builder's fault, or if anything happens like basic settling cracks and stuff like that, that will always happen as the home is settling into the ground is figuring out what to do under the weight of the home. The builder should have a warranty for those. So settling cracks, if a door suddenly doesn't close well, that's covered. If there's a massive scratch on the wall that you discover, that's covered, which is another big thing is when you first move in, you're going to have like basically a blue tape session with your builder and be like, hey, here's issues that I found. Let's get these fixed before we move in. Oh, sorry, my phone disconnected, or my headphones disconnected to my phone. Anyways, but so you're gonna have that blue tape session, and so then you can go through and they'll make repairs. A light doesn't work properly. You missed a painting in the closet. You again, settling cracks, whatever. But over the course of that first year, you want to keep a really good idea of, hey, I'm noticing cracks here. Hey, I'm noticing a door isn't closing here. This faucet is not working properly. And depending on how you went about that, either the contractor will handle it and fix it, or if you worked directly with the place that you got your faucets, your shower heads, your whatever, then you can go through the warranty with them. But as you're going through all those purchases, just make sure you understand their warranty information and you save their information. So that you can contact them. But in theory, after that first year or whatever the builder warranty is, you're just living your life in your new home. That's amazing. You spent tons of money on, tons of times on, put tons of just heart and energy on. And this place that you worked so hard to make yours is finally yours to live in, which is a amazing, amazing feeling. But so that's the surprisingly short, I know 40 minutes so far does not seem short, but that is the surprisingly short look at, from literally I'm ready to it's done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh no, I can't hear you. One sec. I think my headphones get disconnected. Give me 1 second. Okay, I don't know why I can't hear you, but I suddenly cannot hear you.
It's okay.
Oh wait, now I can
hear. So yeah, I'm actually surprised you were able to do it in under 40 minutes. That was pretty impressive. I was like, I'm
that
gonna be like a 2-hour episode or longest episode ever, but you did a great job. So I know, and it may be repeating, but for those of us who've stuck it out this long, right, with us, any final words and or was it worth it in the end?
Yeah, it was definitely worth it. We're depending on if you ask me or my husband will depend on if we say yes, we'll do it again. My answer to that is I would totally do it again as long as we have tons of disposable income so that we're not as tight between payouts from the bank so that we can hire an interior designer instead of doing all of the work ourselves. I would put more money to more resources. But aside from that, I would 100% do it again. I think it's really cool to go from a blank slate, untouched land to just a beautiful home. And we're lucky enough to have been able to build our dream home. Not everybody is lucky enough to do that. And yes, it was a headache. Yes, there was a lot of time. Yes, there's a lot of money. Yes, there was a lot of fights like we've covered in the past, but it's kind of cool. Like, hey, I wired some of this stuff myself because we want to save money on electrical people. Hey, we chose these windows for a very specific reason and they look freaking fabulous here. Hey, we chose this paint and hell yeah, it works really well in the space, just like we wanted to. But you know what? That dining room, not exactly the layout I would do again. But hey, now we know for the future. I mean, it's even the things that you don't like, the things that you wish you can change are still pretty cool. It's actually, to me, less frustrating and more just like, ooh, learning opportunity. Now we can know for next time. Or just, hey, this is a future project. Like just because it's new construction doesn't mean that there's projects that you don't have to do. We also skipped a lot of the finishing touches in the house, like accent walls and stuff like that to save money, but we still have those projects now. So it's really cool to be in a place that is kind of like your little baby of 3+ years.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it is like you were saying, people sometimes are like, oh, yeah, I want a new house because then I don't have to do anything and I don't have to worry about anything. But like you said, you're always going to have, it's always going to be a work in progress. It's always going to be something things are going to change. You're going to change. You're always going to want to make improvements. Things are going to settle. Things are going to, need some adjustments and things like that. But at the end of the day, we have not personally built yet. It is on our list. But even in the remodels, it's some of what you're saying, where it's like, hey, I picked that. That's cool.
Yep. Yep.
That you can't get if you just go buy a house that's already built, someone designed and someone painted, and all that good stuff. So I really appreciate it. And is this the end of our new build, or are we
we have a few things left. So next week we're going to be doing stats for April. But the week after that, we're going to talk about my personal build, like sharing the stories of my build. So we're going to share photos and videos and stuff like that and kind of go through memory lane for me. But also we've been talking about the process, but what does the process actually look like? Going through some of that. There's also on our list things like we're both going to talk about trials and triumphs of like your rebuild or your remodels versus custom builds. And we're going to talk about like hiccups and issues. Like we've touched on it here and there, but there's definitely a lot more of like
deep dive.
Oh crap. Yeah. Something happened. How do we go about fixing it and doing more of a deep dive on that? So we have a few more episodes of custom building left, but we're definitely nearing the end. So it's been exciting.
Well, I'm super excited. I'm especially excited about, we have purposely not, I have not seen the pictures, the video. Heather had done some great documentation along the way, but I have not checked any of that out. So I am super excited to share that with you guys. And so we will see you next week with our statistics recap in April. And happy May, everybody, by the way, May 1st. So anyway, we will see you guys very soon next week. Same time, same place.